I'm Jason, and welcome you to the Take Heart podcast. In a world where it's easy to lose heart, may this podcast be an invitation for you to find calm in the chaos. Together, we'll tune in with our hearts and distinguish the signal of Christ from the noise of Christianity. Have you ever been held hostage by a talker? Have you ever devised a devious plan to have someone call you in the middle of a meeting to spring you from the hold of a talking tyrant? Would breaking your own hand under the table or behind your back be a better escape option than continuing to suffocate in the relational oxygen deprived monologue from a me monster? Have you been frustrated receiving a piece of someone's mind when deep down you're craving a piece of their heart? Well, the backstory to this episode is I'm an introvert. And if there were a universal word counter of how many words I've spoken in my life versus the number of words that these ears have absorbed, the former number might mirror our national debt. Growing up with a conversational dominant dad whom I adore, it has taken years for me to find my own voice. And one of the tools I use to help cultivate conversation and heart-to-heart connection is one we practice in our communities called gentle curiosity. Today's podcast is aimed at exploring how the practice of gentle curiosity can cure conversational narcissism. We'll look at how curiosity cures being a conversational me monster and how curiosity cures a suicide. Listen, the big picture to this skill of gentle curiosity is that it's something learned. And if no one has shown us how to become us-centered, it is likely will remain self-centered, even blindly so. And it doesn't matter how old we are. If no one has modeled for us how to have healthy relational conversations, we can remain in the endless loop of self-referential unawareness. When we tend to make it all about us, it's a sign that we're arrested in our developmental maturity. Aging is inevitable, but maturity is optional. And this applies to all people, parents, spouses, you, me, but especially pertains to leaders, pastors, and professionals. If this elementary skill is lacking, one could be the most erudite person of impact and influence, have more degrees than Fahrenheit, yet miss the heart of the one before them. Conversational narcissism does not discriminate. Why does this matter? If we want to develop deep and satisfying relationships with people and go beyond the surface of just merely talking head to head, gentle curiosity allows us to see and be seen, to be heard, and provides this pathway for genuine heart-to-heart attachment. Now, to the two cures. The first way gentle curiosity can cure conversational narcissism is by looking in the mirror and asking ourselves the question, might I have tendencies to make a conversation more about myself rather than the other person? There's almost no better mirror to look at than in the comedic reflection of Brian Regan's bit called The Me Monster. I'll link that in the show notes. Please have a listen. And this is the quintessential upmanship that can disguise itself in many forms. There are the conversational hoarders, the conversational monopolizers, and the conversational hijackers. You've seen them. And these are the ones who steal the last bit of oxygen in the room while stinging your eyes with the secondhand smoke of their me monster story. They also can show up in the form of conversational experts, conversational unsolicited advice givers. This triggers me just talking about it. And it may or it may not be so much that they care. Maybe it's mixed, but sometimes it's an opportunity for them to showcase all that they know. And often these conversational know-it-alls, they have the need to constantly interrupt and offer correction on insignificant details. But apparently they miss the memo that they don't have to be a live Google for everyone in their radius. One of the cures to being a conversational me monster is self-awareness. And the primary way that we train ourselves to have healthy self-awareness is by becoming a radical attention payer. A radical attention payer, not only to our story, but to the story of those around us. Once we step off the stage of ourselves, we begin noticing. We notice others. We notice their emotions. We notice their interest level. We notice their bandwidth or capacity to engage. We begin to pay attention to their body language, their affect, and tone. We learn to hear and see beyond mere verbal discourse. Yet when we're blinded by conversational grandiosity and have to insert or redirect the conversation back to us and our experience or our opinions, it's likely that conversational manipulation is afoot. And we need to be cured of being a conversational me monster. Okay, now the second way gentle curiosity can cure conversational narcissism is by helping to avoid assumicide. Are you familiar with this term, assumicide? Even if you haven't heard it before, I bet you're acquainted with its meaning. Assumicide. When we assume that everyone thinks, feels, or acts like us, it's likely we engage in assumicide. Listen, I'm from Long Island, New York, and growing up in that wonderful space, there was this level of ethnocentric, myopic, insular viewpoints that I thought everyone talked like me, thought like me, and fought like me. But until I got to visit some other places in the world, I found out that there were other viewpoints. Thanks be to God. I do love my homegrown soil. But when we assume that everyone is like us in our actions and reactions, etc., it's likely that we engage in assumicide. One online definition puts it this way: the way we murder other people in our hearts by the false assumptions we make about them. So assumicide is the way that we murder other people in our hearts by the false assumptions that we make about them. Intense, right? Assumicide. And so how can you build healthy attachment with people who believe differently than you? How can you remain in relationship with people who have radically different positions politically or religiously or culturally? How can you step aside from really strong feelings, thoughts, interpretations, and perspectives to suspend your quick judgment to really understand what the person in front of you is saying? Our assumptions tend to erect barriers to belonging, whereas gentle curiosity, it builds a bridge of belonging. Gentle curiosity helps us. It helps us to check our prejudgments at the door, and it enables us to let go of negativity and limiting beliefs. Simply put, for me, it is a tool to make me less of a tool. It has been immeasurably helpful for me to sharpen my relational skills. It provides the basis for reciprocal conversation, but it's especially helpful for tense moments. Instead of reacting to someone like, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," whether verbally or in my face or my body or even behind my eyeballs, and putting up a wall. Instead, we can build a bridge of belonging, and in forming this sense of belonging with the other, we begin to build openness and trust with one another, and we see that connection. So there isn't much or any separation. And so when there's a comment or a question that, online or in person, that might make my head turn sideways, and trust me, there's no shortage of them. It's the skill of gentle curiosity. It just doesn't put the other against the ropes with a snide or sarcastic or cynical comment, or put them down. It doesn't make a misunderstanding a you versus me problem. And instead, I try asking, tell me more about that. What does that look like for you? And trying to get my foot in the shoe of their understanding, it helps me to not be defensive. And so instead, I could ask, what do you mean by that? Whatever they say, whether I agree or disagree, what do you mean by that? And ask that in a really gentle and non-threatening way to really see where someone is coming from. And by looking for clarity and finding out maybe what I don't know, and giving myself a moment of pause and breath, that extra moment of quieting and calming, it offers a space of that calm to my body. And it often reduces the volume of the megaphone of my mind. And without that, it's so much easier just to blurt out my opinion or bias or judgment and steer it all back to me. Gentle curiosity asks questions to seek understanding, and has a goal of connecting heart to heart, slowing down this aspect of conversation. Instead of simply saying what you've always said, it gives you an opportunity to give a beat to your own feelings and thoughts in order to understand someone else. What if we could consistently practice love and kindness in this way, even in the face of disagreement over differing values and missions and perspectives? What would it look like in your life if you were able to exercise this skill of gentle curiosity in the midst of relational conflict? I'll place some links in the show notes for the Me Monster video. You want to make sure you watch that. Don't have coffee or a beverage in your mouth, because I guarantee you'll spit it out. And I'll also link 2 resources about curiosity from my friends John White and Tony Daniels in their podcast that you want to tune into as well. If you're someone who would like to grow in relational skills and become a better listener and conversationalist, stay tuned for future episodes where we'll discover the power of asking really brilliant questions. How could curiosity be your new superpower? We really appreciate you listening to this episode of the Take Heart podcast. Are you longing for deep and meaningful spiritual community? Do you desire heart-to-heart connection with God and others? How can we take heart again so that we can give heart to others? We'd like to invite you into a community of practice, a people of belonging and bliss. More than mere talk, we practice. Why does practice matter? Well, practice matters because maturity matters. If you can't lead yourself well, how can you lead others? Consider joining us for an intro call at luke10.com, lk10.com, to explore what a safe and secure experience looks like to build, develop, and implement skills of relational connection and emotional intelligence so that we can become vibrant and joy-fueled families of Jesus. Jesus, Master of Hearts, said, "I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." May you continue to take heart, one podcast at a time.